Crystallography by Christian Book. Read by Ken Hunt. For the Angel in the Angle. Crystallographers have opened the gate that gives access to a vast land, but they themselves have not entered, for they are by nature more interested in the means by which to open the portal, rather than in the domain that lies beyond it. Long ago, during my wanderings, I happened to chance upon the neighborhood of this domain. I saw a high wall, and because I had a presentiment of some enigma that might be hiding behind it, I climbed the wall with difficulty. On the other side, I landed in a wilderness through which I had to make my way with much effort until I arrived via detours at the open gate of mathematics, from which many clear paths extended in all directions. Sometimes I think that I have explored this entire garden, that I have trodden all its paths, and that I have admired all its views, when all of a sudden I detect another new pathway, and once again I savor another new delight. I spend time there in refreshing but oppressive loneliness. The Regular Division of the Plane, M.C. Escher. Preliminary Survey. Crystals. A crystal is an atomic tessellation, a tri-dimensional jigsaw puzzle in which every piece is the same shape. A crystal assembles itself out of its own constituent disarray. The puzzle puts itself together, each piece falling, as though by chance, into its correct location. A crystal is nothing more than a breeze blowing sand into the form of a castle, or a film played backwards of a window being smashed. A compound, word, dissolved in a liquid supercooled under microgravitational conditions, precipitates out of solution in alphabetical order to form crystals whose structuralistic perfection rivals the beauty of machine-tooled objects. An archaeologist, without any mineralogical experience, might easily mistake a crystal for the artificial product of a precision technology. A word is a bit of crystal in formation. Crystals. Astral salt cast astray. Amethyst. Sibylline orchid, oblivious. Experiment number 1. Amethyst sugar stains tap water, like the inkjet spray of toner on wet paper. Words but dust dissolved away, so faint liquid can transmute at the chiming of the teaspoon into grape paint. Supersaturation. Surgical thread dipped in slowly cooling glasses of warm seltzer, with its solute at a high degree of concentration, attracts stray atoms in the way a magnetic wire grows a cluster of iron filings. Co-precipitation. Textbooks teach you that to lock solutions in your icebox overnight can precipitate from water candy on a cord, words accreting meaning, so that the line can end at last in the sweetest of stalactites. Crystallization. Fractal geometry. Fractals are haphazard maps that entrap entropy in tropes. Fractals tell their raconteurs to counteract at every point the contours of what thought recounts, a line, a plot, recant the chronicle that cannot coil into itself. Let the story stray off course, its countless details, pointless detours, all en route toward a tour de force, where the here and now of nowhere is. Don't ramble, lest your dream about a random belt of words brought to you by Mandelbrot. Fractals are a pretty naughty way to say the length of any coastline depends upon the lengths to which a ruler goes. A lost vacationer who strolls along a beach patrols a spatial breach between dimensions. A fractal is the ideal of redundancy, an obsessive restatement, reinstatement of itself, by itself, in itself, a never-ending message that digresses from its digressions, yet nevertheless repeats the same message over and over and over, ad infinitum. A fractal is the ideal of redundancy. Imagine a series of Chinese boxes in which each box contains a series of Chinese boxes. An acoustic fractal would be its own echo chamber. Never forget that fractal music sounds the same when played at any speed. Navigate the futile maze this sentence plans to be. Newfangle its simplicity. When two identical mirrors face each other, their cycle of self-reflection recedes forever into an infinite exchange of self-absorption. Each mirror infects itself at every scale with the virus of its own image. Each mirror devours itself at every point with the abyss of its own dream. When we gaze upon a fractal, we must peer at a one-way mirror, unaware of other mirrors standing somewhere far behind us. Mirror rim, all its sides reversed, is still a mirror rim. A fractal is a fatal arc, an act as artful as a fall. A snowflake knows a leaf. Ruby. Alizarine albedo, oriflame, orchestrina, oxyacetylene. Glass. Mercurial magma, sand, lime, and soda cool into a vitreous solid, the most viscous fluid, a virtual liquid, thick enough to seem rigid. Fragile language. Glass represents a poetic element exiled to a borderline between states of matter. Breakable water, not yet frozen, yet unpourable. Chatoyant panes in cathedral windows flow too slow for eyes to see. Illuminated manuscripts written on glass pages, bleeding away ages of images. Downward blur of watercolor sunsets, melting ink in thin paraffin walls. The windshield, dripping like raindrops upon it, but more incrementally. Glass acoustics, celestial music, hyaline instrumentarium, violins, bottle trees, harmonicas and water gongs, wet tambourines and wind chimes, icy glockenspiels and clavicylinders. Glass resonates until shattered by precise song. Optic anomalies magnify vision. Meaning, a form of glassiness, the misprision of transparency. Emerald. Crownland bromontage, side-reel opulence of sinfulness, opaque, ornate, Orphic. Silk screens of silent orchards, oracular silviculture, alembic of silhouettes, bezels, oblique optics, beryloid observatory, alkali octane, oxides, ozone overworld of Oz. Bifringence. C. In silk-screened kimonos, blowtorch scars on metal. Wings of iridescent insects, the aurora borealis. C. In stained glass windows, spotlight gels for sunlight. Broken slides of hoarfrost crystals magnified through polarizers. C. In gasoline rainbows, eyes plucked from peacock fans fueling dreams of burning asphalt. Words kaleidoscope together. Houseflies see the world through gemstones. Crystals. A crystal makes a lens through which a cubist painter might see the world as it really is. A crystal photographs spring water as it splashes into natural glass so frigid that no furnaces can melt it, or so thinks the sophist who decides to drink from alpine creeks where he mistakes a flint of quartz for ice, only to admire that it does not chill his touch but despite his warmth defies him. A crystal is the flashpoint of a dream, intense enough to purge the eye of its infection. Sight. A chance fragment of unblemished quartz polished in a riverbed by a flowing mixture of sand and rain may have let Neanderthals study shadows cast by craters on the moon. A yardstick inserted into an aquarium bends in conformity with a localized curvature of space. However, educated observers, their senses easily deceived by evidence of sensory deception, call this phenomenon an optical illusion. A word, like love, has a high refractive index. Geodes. This antechamber of words in which you awaken is a petrified forest. Its image, inverted then reflected through itself, a confusion of stalactites, stalagmites, jutting spikes of calcite, at mirrors that do not exist. A faucet drip, the sound of outer space, underground. Beads of candle wax fall from silt icicles, gravity building the replica of the ceiling on the floor over eons of the most delicate yet unplanned architecture. Climb across these shelves of rock in search of this book. Dream of reading through a passage so narrow that its walls threaten to press into fossils the broken bones of a breath. You trip over shadows, scrape palms on sharp rocks as small as glass from crushed bottles. Their grit clogs your wounds. You follow the distant murmur of voices in riffling pages, cracks in the crust of the earth, long ago released hydrogen sulfide, a gas that percolated up through fissures in the rocks until it hit the water table and, reacting with oxygen, generated sulfuric acid that ate through the stone and left in its wake bronchial passages. be the first to inhale their unbreathed air. Thieves here leave no trace of their crime, not even the theft of the item. Reset all rocks dislodged underfoot. Brush back into place each cobweb of thought as you pass through it. Be like the breeze, with fireflies in it. Biodegradation is slowed in the cave, so that you are as good as immortal. All ways are alleyways that always waylay you. Any path that you take breaks from its root in the way that a root word, when said, gets tangled in its ganglia. The secret that you say sotto voce, like a wish, ricochets into echoes. Spelunkers find a way through the cave by touching on the wall a textured map made by the past hands that have passed over it. Blindfolds are the logical eyewear. Handholds are the braille of geology. Arteriosclerotic veins of pyrite riddle the flesh of the bedrock, a body drained of all blood, but refilled with a golden transfusion of volcanic magma. All maps here are axodendritic. Their diagrams depict the random mutations of a deformed anatomy whose disembodied organs connect without order. Fallopian tubes act as digestive tracts that join uterus to anus, every esophagus an umbilicus through which bladders evacuate waste into cul-de-sac stomachs. You become a castaway, adrift off these islets of Langrams. This speleological formation imitates on a grandiose scale the network of cells in the fossilized remnant of extinct porifera that remain in death absorbative, the abandoned exoskeleton of a sponge. The crypt for a googolplex of corpses, anthozoa, gastropods, crinoids, bryozoa, brachiopods, blastoids, enchinozoa, scaphopods, cystoids, archaeannelids, entomoscradians, lamellibranchs, coelenterates, the lost animalcuae from alien seas. Such dross amassed under pressure of its own intensified weight crushes itself into a sediment for mnemonics. All the broken letters of the alphabet, the crustaceous husks of invertebrates. Cascades from subterranean springs lacquer slopes of flowstone into aeronautic contours that nature retests in wind tunnels. Cloud bursts in brainstorms osmose through the porous membranes of these strata, irrigate this defunct system of aquifers and aqueducts, saturate with new meaning the dead languages of rock. Mudslides cement an onrush of words into photos of flow. The smashed bits of clamshells, mollusks, and barnacles, stucco walls with the texture of coral. You stroll among plow blades of stone surf, whose wave crests a stop-action camera has frozen one instant before gravity crashes them down into rubble. Salt frosting coats Baroque rock to create ice draperies that unfold into waterfalls, quartz razors glittering in a puddle of shards. An underwater sun of uranium glows with a chlorinated light in the coolant of the aquarium. Any bacterium bred in the core of the reactor evolves over time into an albino locust that feasts upon phosphorescent lichen. Pale minnows flit in this cistern of deuterium, the heavy water so pure that it cannot conduct electricity, the surface serene despite the speed of the current. A pearl can form in the absence of any oyster, if a bit of salt grit attains a china finish after being sprayed by lacrimal splashes. Delicate words simply dissolve when immersed in their meaning. Deposits of silica crystallize outward in concentric rings across the surface of a pond whose receding water levels leaves behind a bowl of tears upon a pedestal in a garden. You steal a drink from this font, this bird bath for bats. Tiny balloons of magnesite filled with carbon dioxide cling like barnacles to a wall underwater, each a cocoon for a breath, its fragile shell releasing when shattered a secret in the drowning cry of a skin diver. The jellyfish bubbles, floating up to break open, unheard in the dark. Ripples that lap at the shore rewrite these marginal notes. Fluorescent algae on the ceiling can mimic constellations never seen in the cave. Chemosynthetic bacteria feed upon sulfur manganese and limestone. Microorganisms sculpt crystal growth into bioengineered gardens. Argonite dandelions, gypsum bottle brushes, rock salt chandeliers, hydroponic flowers in plutonic hothouses. Angel hair crystals as tall as 10 meters, yet so fragile a breath can destroy them. Twist white vines of frailty into the air. No wonder, expressed for fear of erasing each wisp of smoke, each vapor trail. Amethyst teeth grow into the yolk of a geode, each interior crystal a rock song of thought, an engram forgotten inside a stone cranium. Follow the path in the receding mirage of these syllables. Earthquakes low on the Richter scale crack maculated cliffs, ramparts, bulwarks, parapets, collapsing over time into other variations on the same barricade. You climb across crenellations in the form of these sentences, the buried ruins of battlements in a fortress sapped by miners, a toppled panoply of turrets, cupolas, minarets, and steeples. Spiked vocabules in these caves make a phalanx for the pharynx, their syntax a cheval de frise, a stalactiform portcullis to bar access to worlds beyond words. Explore this schismatic edifice through drain pipes and ductwork, crawl spaces for interconnecting vaults of nothing but cornices, all these chambers but clusters of grapes on the ivy of tunnels. Storm ditches ankle-deep in bleached flour lead you astray through catacombs as convoluted as warrens in an anthill or canals in the cochlea of an ear. You step across the chasms between the words on these pages, taking care not to lose footing lest you fall into them. Elevator shafts without cables. A spider rappels down its silk filament to attack a butterfly trapped in a cobweb of amber. Landslides drag you down a funneled pit through the waste of an hourglass into an oubliette for all sleepers. Gravel. Showers bruise your body till you swoon. The sand, a fluid solid, spilling time away into dunes on display in tiny jars. Geology writes a eulogy for all that it buries by pressing words like moths between pages of a mammoth encyclopedia. Floating guano dust transforms the reality of these caverns into a sepia photograph. Stagger through the cave into a dark planetarium where, looking up, you see, looking back, a nighttime sky full of tiny ruby stars, the eyes of 1,000 bats, vampiric angels who scream in a chorus, castigate you for disturbing their sleep. The standing ovations fall from the ceiling in leathery fragments. A book with its binding unstitched, flung away at night from the heights of a cliff. These caverns exhibit avant-garde sculptures that communicate patient but unknown architects. Dolomite pagodas, built one grain of dust at a time, melt in the rain like models of mushroom clouds. Obelisks glazed with a glycerol film of water as if made from kiln-fired ceramics bake in a slow geothermal. Limestone saunas swelter in acidic vapor, trickles of sweat furrowing pleats into curtains of sandpaper. Each memory is eroded, not erased, for the cavern never ceases to record its history in the code of its crystals. Key to speleological formations. A. Uneroded boulder of dolomite. B. Cliffside buttressed by boulder. C. Cavern with eroded interior. D. Cliffside buttressed by boulder. E. Grotto with underhanging ledge. F. Waterfall sluicing over precipice. G. Eroded obelisk of flowstone. H. Cliffside with abutting archway. I. Plinth from broken stalagmite. J. Precipice with collapsed ledge. K. Cliffside with flying buttresses. L. Unbroken column of dolomite. M. Cavernous vault of stalactites. N. Archway of oolithic limestone. O. Weathered boulder of dolomite. P. Precipice with overhanging grotto. Q. Precipice with overhanging grotto. R. Overhanging shelf of bedrock. S. Escarpment with avalanching scree. T. Crumbling column with ledges. U. Trench from alluvial riverbed. V. Geological fissure cut in bedrock. W. Cavernous field of stalagmites. X. Reputed location of buried treasure. Y. Cleft with underhanging ledge. Z. Escarpment with overhanging ledge. Dash. Sandstone bridge over canyon. Comma. Rock fragment containing fossils. Period. Rock fragment containing geodes. Colon. Exposed seam of precious minerals. Diamonds. C is for diamond, the one gem made of one element, carbon. Chimney soot, crushed coal, charred wood, fire at its core. My father was a sad gem cutter. He made jewels more precious by smashing them, spoke only words pared down to the edge of their silence, and strove to break out of, each house of mirrors held at the tip of his tongs. My father taught me precision. He retired, nerves shot by the threat of a slipped razor. The diamond is a darkness so intense the eye sees through it. Transparent charcoal. Under pressure all things are clear, but just be sure to remember diamond dust is black. My father once gave me a gift, an Apache tear, a black pebble, opaque until I held it up against direct light. Then the smoke trapped inside became visible. After hours of solitude, when drunk, he recalled the native widow who lamented her loss for so long. The Great Spirit transfigured her tears into drops of black crystal, thus bequeathing to all who fall in love keepsakes of her sorrow. My father, too broke to be wed, never got my mother a diamond. He claimed to adore her too much to profane her with gems made of ashes. Blowtorch a diamond, enkindled when ruby it blazes, just as melting dry ice vaporizes as a breath. Organic stone, not sterile but burning. Crystals made from the same thing as life. Life. The percentage of light that a diamond reflects back towards its viewer. Fire. The degree to which a diamond refracts light into its component colors. My father opened the field guide to crystals, to pages with fine print, to show me how to decipher a language. He gave me his gem cutter's eyepiece and left me alone to revel in detail. Edges of serifs, fibers in paper. Only later did he teach me how to sound out the words. Life times fire equals brilliance. All this is true. Plato was the first to regard a diamond as frozen quintessence, a soul in suspended animation, a vestige of heaven within earth. My father taught me precision. He studied mineralogy at Antwerp, tended saw for a firm in Bruggen, saw one gem take 2 years to be split into 2. De Mundi. All his life an attempt to see the free point trapped in perfection. My father put faith in no God. A member of the cubic crystal system, a diamond denotes the highest state of symmetry, an ideal array of cuts, acute angles, platonic solids. Nature needs no tool and die to make its octahedrons. Crystal shards. A diamond is an equilateral triangle that mirrors itself through one side. Over drinks after hours of stress over diamonds, an expert in the making of fake gems bet no one was able to tell of two gems which was the true one, which was the copy, without use of either scratch plate or lens. No jeweler won the bet, but the one who let the two gems drop into his creme de menthe. The one that sank slower was a fake. Adamas means invincible. No known jewel in the mineral kingdom rivals diamond, king of stones, adamant in the silence. No words break, indivisible as a star. Only diamonds scar diamonds. Sawyers thought my father crazy. The day his eye was cut open by a stray chip of diamond. His mind making his hand finish its adjustments to the saw blade before breaking out in a scream. Afterwards, his regret. His sight was saved, but not the diamond. Mazarine, Rondel, Peruzzi, Trilliant, Pendeloque, Priolet, Chiffre, Marquise, Jubilee. A diamond's cut is just a jeweler's pretty name for a wound. My father, never breathing a lie, brillianteering, fashioned girdles and cullets to fit impervious armor, designed tables upon which only the eye feasted, erected pavilions above which kites and stars hovered. The bruited gem set in its dop is scoured by the scaife, a grinding disc oiled with a mix of diamond powder and lubricants. The merest hammer blow on a blade, whose edge cuts along a kerf, can shear away the faults of any gem. Adamantine discipline, a lapidary gramophone, inflexible exactitude. Its stylus wears away its song, even as it sings it. My shock at blood, where he nicked a cheek shaving. Transparency is the gauge of all value. When cutting, when writing, a diamond is an absence of nothing but darkness. Occlusions supposedly depreciate perfection. My father spotted flaws by breathing on a stone to dull the luster that obscured them. Bubbles, fizzles, cracks, gnats, clouds, glats, fringes. Carbon strains to create life. He showed me a diamond whose defect resembled a diminutive butterfly in the image of its flaws. Diamond is formed by denotating graphite in a compact container. Diamond, flat, black, graphite, bent, clear. Crystallized carbon, graphite and diamond, have nearly the same atomic black ice matrix, a lattice. A cold jigsaw puzzle, its pieces hexagons, abandoned honeycomb. Sweet spaces between words, between atoms, and among them strong bonds. My father detested writing with a dull pencil. Writing to him meant using a blunt instrument by which he dulled edges of pen knives, my own knives, to sharpen the points made in his manual on diamond cutting. My father once stole a diamond, discarded as worthless at work, and using corrosive and saw blade, etched into it his monogram as though to be rid of a scar, by leaving behind him a scar, a name to outlast him. Medieval Arabs needed no lasers to carve their prayers onto the faces of diamonds. A Shah captured in war refused to surrender the location of the Koh-i-Noor, the mountain of light, even though torturers blinded him. A duke who never let his gemstones be taken from his sight for fear of losing them lost the Florentine while in battle, the diamond for days amid weeds, then mistaken for glass by a guard who sold it to a monk for a florin. Avoirdupois, troy ounces. The slight weight of one carob seed can tip a fragile balance of forces in a commonwealth. My father appraised the value in a carats for a gem, with the use of no scale but his hand. The Orloff was stolen from the eye of a god by a soldier in the guise of a priest, so that later a prince might try in vain to woo a czarina. A sultan once worshipped the matan because of the demons locked in it, safeguarding the law of his empire. My father, trusting no fiction because it told lies, told me only true stories about the exploits of men owning gems. A wealthy collector, jealous of a future possessor, commanded servants to shatter the pigget, its bits in his grip, cutting him as he lay dying. The hope was a curse. Collinian, Excelsior, Lesotho, Coromandel, Berglin, Kimberley, Victoria. Violent words undermining. Slaves excavate raw ice out of the blue, topsoil from an extinct volcano. Imperial diamonds sundered to adorn weddings and wars. Warm kimberlite, its ash a starry meadow. Yields diminish with depth. Ad dominam omnis. Gems dot a sky with their own constellations. Every vow a net set to catch stars. Every lie a rip cut in the threads. A handful of stones flung moonward, a promise to summon meteor showers. We fumble for words amidst cinders. We barter with bits of bright hail. Sir Isaac Newton, in theory, defined diamonds as an unctuous substance much coagulated. The physicist even had a dog named Diamond. The blood of angels congealed into hard teardrops of purity. The girl's best friend was also once a man's. Long division among sawyers, Word, 23 plus 15 plus 18 plus 4 equals 60. The reduction of 1 to 2 to make millions. 4 plus 9 plus 1 plus 13 plus 15 plus 14 plus 4 equals diamond. My father, becoming the gifted protege despite poor birth, discovered arithmetic perfection by reading trigonometry texts on his own when 7. Crystal classes, organic unities, magical squares. The transcendental correlation proven by Euler's theorem. My father taught me precision, always trying to make his mind fit the mathematical straitjacket of a jewel. Diamond has a high thermoconductivity, absorbing heat faster than any other matter known to exist. A precious coating to cool microchips. Crystal films, miniaturizing communication. My father, the model of poetic restraint. Every jewel a fist, which strains to keep harsh light from spilling through its fingers. The tone of his voice unchanged, even when angry. My father could not formulate the words to create out of us one Mackle, a twin gemstone. More life means less fire. More fire means less life. He found a way to strike. A diamond. To strike a balance between the two. He deemed me a naif, a natural facet yet to be cut. The blade of silence between us. The unspoken burning inside him. I am in a dim diamond. April birthstone, reverent forever. Medical remedies in ancient times claimed diamonds nullified poison. Steel industries use diamond bort as aggressive grit in iron grinding. Arabian assassins mixed into water powdered diamond to execute kings. The red coughing of my sad father, sipping his last shots of liquor laced with glass, trying to escape the very diamond crushed into hot ashes inside him. A damned diamond for a mad domain. I am, and I am, and I am, and I am, and I die. Amen. My father, unto death, taught me the divine endurance of diamond. The hagiography of snow. Crystals. A crystal may take as long to grow as a star at the edge of the universe may take to show its presence in the sky. A crystal manufactures itself tier by tier, each epitaxial layer so thin that crystallization is akin to a pharaoh whose slaves build for him a pyramid by applying infinite coats of paint to the same surface area. A crystal is a mineral blossom, never quick to germinate in pure solutions, since the flower needs a flaw to form a substrate for its calyx. A crystal is the most exquisite parasite upon a spindrift seed. A white pearl goes slowly nova from a particle of black sand. A tulip dipped in liquid nitrogen undergoes instantaneous cryonics, whereupon the flower can be smashed to bits as easily as a wine glass. A word, when read aloud, is such a crystal being shattered by a sequence of high-frequency vibrations. Opal. Ombre silver birches, organza obscure, harlequin hailstorm. Kalokagathia. Stars are bubbles of air rising through an infinite depth. We rise with them through this dark, slow-motion snowfall in reverse. Sleep through our ascent, bound at wrist and ankle by the chains from silver watches, anchors without weight. Even as we dream, we hold our breath against the moment when we crash through this surface tension, as though through a sheet of glass, into still another depth, with other stars, the fragments of our last collision in our wake, eyes shut tight, and every mouth the photo of a scream. Turbulent winds can break off the fragile branches of a stellar crystal as it falls, and often the branches regenerate during the descent. But even after reaching the ground, these fragments can suffer further modification. Winds can disintegrate each crystal by abrading it against other crystals so that when the fallen remnant comes to rest at last beneath the microscope of the observer, the specimen often bears little resemblance to the original particle formed high in the ionosphere. Triptych. Dark glass by the bed at night, 3 paintings in pale stains. Love, a triptych of frost fractals. White ferns awash in moon glare, leaves serrated clash cross swords, feather edges bristle into each other. 3 cobweb arabesques look through each pane at winter, yet not so close, lest words be trapped in the icy lattice work of breath. Frost developing its nocturnal film reveals neural maps on windows. Love is the intricate growth of a crystal in a dream of time-lapse photography, each moment dendritic, a juncture that branches out into all of its possible foliage, each decision a routine for pruning the tree, itself a curtain of razors. Look at each screen of crystalliferous scars beyond which a sky of eiderdown falls, the white arborescence of flame, beheld in the flash of a stroboscope. Love lets you contemplate its negative at the instant in which it is taken. Foil mirror backs, lace bridal veils, rice paper fans. All nothing more than mere smoke embroidered in these windows. Look, beyond the translucence of writing, to a cryonic kiss before sleep. Midwinter Glaciaria. Chandelier breezes at midnight, actinic, wash over a backdrop of linen, upon which transparency machines make bioluminescent the image of snow. Nightfall meadows, seen through screen doors at winter-time, undulate into Felsenmeers, strobe lit like a slow-mo chiaroscuro. Mammals hibernating simultaneously twitch in their cryogenic sleep, each a seasonal fetus in its bleach amnion. Vodka drips from the tip of an icicle. Neon moonlight amplifies this field of vision beyond whose horizons all events vanish. Deciduous trees, black without foliation, etch neural pathways on a dream of glass photographs. Nitrates of silver electroplate mirrors. Peroxide evaporates from smashed ampules of ice. Timber wolves circle the clearing. Two pantomime children perform the drama of winter. The girl, in lace, pouring pitchers of ice water over the kneeling form of her nude sister, whose shivers subside into an icy chrysalis. The audience unseen, as it watches liquid nitrogen spill over the edge of the stage. Ethereal theater. December constellations in vacuum tube skies glitter until smashed by a breath into blizzards. Microscopic, the shrapnel from distant explosions administers a cold acupuncture. Quartz grit dancing in the fray of high-beam glare. Minuscule pinwheels, bladed, cut into the windshield. Silent attack without witness, the driver drifting to sleep at the wheel as he breathes in time to slow jazz intermixed with soft radio static. Astronavigation through a snow squall. Pulverized mirrors whose reflections broken make us dream that the darkness assails us with stars. Nacreous confetti. Snowdrifts avalanche at the hush of a hammer, and feather dropped by an astronaut upon lunar ashes. Birch trees in moonlight cast zebra shadows. Mercury streams decant themselves over rock gardens, cool acid dissolving in the myelin frost. Snowy owls never take wing but use astral projection to glide into the violence of prey. Hypoxic, every breath in the rarefied air. Nerves ionized to the point of pinprick electrocution. Frozen, the cobwebs obscure the view through this window. Peppermint daylight at noon upon Fernspiegel burns like a magnesium flare, each grain of ice a tiny hieroglyph that flashes a telepathic transmission. Waterford crystal juts its stalactites down from the eaves. Damoclean, the swords glint in a row, the heat from your body beneath, triggering the fall. Narwhal horns. Viking boys snap off bayonets from crystalline arsenals so as to stab each other to death, their weapons diluting the blood of their wounds. Sunshine oils hockey rinks with a frictionless skiff of cool water. Diamantiferous fields of white alluvia, wind chimes of glass dangle from wire fences, draft-borne argosies of snow. Frozen dust motes accrete on the tips of eyelashes. Iridium skies toned at the horizon with pewter, airless desolation. Lead poisoning from solder in tin cans of food drives Arctic explorers so insane that they scuttle their ships to board new ships, seen in melting icebergs. Barns in the pale haze, the gray hulls of battleships run aground among ice floes. Words stumbling in the shrill blank of snow blindness, deer hoof prints in plaster. Ski tracks like railways for phantom trolley cars passing through the night without passengers. Aurora Borealis. Moonlight on Grapple, the cold silvery gleam of galena crystals embedded in radio rectifiers. Dandelion seeds of frost descend through the beam of a searchlight onto languid rivers of India ink, each snowflake an ephemeral microcircuit beneath the lens of a magnifying glass. Waterfalls spotlit at the border, cascades unfurling into bridal stage curtains for concealing escarpments of thunder. Evanescent, the mist from the chasm, ossifying into a thick calcification on handrails and street lamps. Alabaster sculptures that thought conjures from thin air. Christmas mirages. Snowplows unmanned patrol empty streets bathed in a sapphire penumbra, somnambulistic machines. Lacteal surf in the wake of their bulldozer blades flows over the bodies of etherized lovers. Cocaine spindrift whirls away across barren parking lots. Seismic tremors on a moonscape agitate soap dust inside the glass paperweight. Pale sparks, filmed for a silent movie, shower down from a sheet of black steel being cut by an arc welder. Wind in the midwinter is an X-ray that opens as a portal before you. White canopies of felt slip from their hooks on pine branches. Arctic voles riddle with tunnels the subnivean layer just as insects etch wormholes beneath the bark of a dead tree. Feathery rime on a timberline snag. Icicle stemware. Invisible, the silversmiths laminate limestone with platinum alloy. Northern lakes protect their exposed surfaces with acrylic membranes. Glycerol pools beneath cedars. Algae fronds sway beneath the window pane of a pond. Skywriting preserved in the wake of your skate blades. Ice is a solid acid that eats into water. We figure 8 to infinity. Stranded archaeologists dine on prehistoric meat from a woolly mammoth paralyzed for 10 millennia inside a receding glacier. Chalk dust settles over tamaracks. Chalets in the valley leak genies of blue smoke from their chimneys at night. Albinic, the blind men ski down wooded slopes to feed on the nightmares of children. Glaze, a Seminole translucence on the snow peak at dawn, each footstep punching through a thin pane, jagged edges that make a bear trap for the ankle. Words sinter together in a sub-zero network of delicate needles, the most fragile of structures because it collapses into itself at the merest disturbance. Angel dust Neve stirred into cirrus clouds by the wraiths in their passing. Suspended animation. Tuning forks shatter this architecture by means of sympathetic resonance. Supercooled droplets of sleet prickle the steel hood of a crashed car. Xylophonic tintinnabulation, tambourine hail, glass bits from the windshield salt the street. Pine trees, pointillistic with ginger fireflies, tungsten bulbs that flicker too fast for the eye. Polar bears maul garbage cans in the alley. Slush on the sidewalk insulates the cellophane wrapper that blooms in a diaphanous flower. Pearlescent sunlight. Toboggans smoldering in the remains of a bonfire at the bottom of the ravine, but no bodies. Sentences such as these broadcast events at dusk in the gray monochrome of television. Ermine, the Niveus pelage. Ivory pagodas with skeletons of blue spruce barricade the forest. Stiff bristles of argonite fill cracks in the wall of the hibernarium. Lavender skies and pink lights of a city in the distance. Excelsior twilight. Harpsichord wind through the trees. Moonrise with its paraselene gives every silhouette an argent corona. Private concert in the gazebo, where a girl rubs her moist fingers round the rims of brandy glasses half filled with distilled water. Sonatinas so pure that their music seems to originate elsewhere. Winter transforms the world into a jewelry store, where Lalique crystal gleams on mirrored shelves in the dark. Snow upon your lips has the taste of chrome sugar. Euclid and his modern rivals. René Justret, 1743 to 1822. Repetition of the same name and the same name and the same name and the same name benumbs us to the sum of its meaning. Crystals partition space with intersecting arrays of parallel lines, and these lines, when woven together, form a complex lattice of letters used to build trellises for the ivy of thought. Icelandic spar, despite its outward form, cracks apart along its fracture planes into rhombohedra, as if these words, when parsed, reveal themselves to be composed of one letter constantly repeated. A fractal crumbles into a smaller copy of its unbroken state. Stars die in a disaster that shatters the stars. Cubes of salt contain mineral holograms. They reveal a complicity between complexity and simplicity. W. H. Miller, 1801 to 1880. Crystallographers who map the myriad facets of a jewel must learn to see the outside of the earth upon the inside of the sky. Crystals are atlases of nothingness. The world disappearing but leaving behind its latitudes and longitudes. The map must never let its readers see the jewel itself, but must show them how to reconstruct it into view. Dewey Decimal numbers triangulate the position of a cubic facet like the cover of a book in a stacked archive of surfaces. Planes are mere plans for panels and panes. The name of a newfound star begins with an alpha numeral, the letter A denoting the most brilliant or most proximate. Crystallographers play connect the dots with these galaxies of thought, colliding in the cloud chambers of a dark room. The last 3 letters of the alphabet christen every single point in space. Properties of the crystalline are proper ties for the crystal line. Auguste Bravas, 1811 to 1863. Crystals maintain the integrity of their structure by forcing each of their parts to tear the whole away from all other parts. Lattices map a stable configuration of lines within a closed system of semiotic relations. Every vertex a node of tension suspended like a letter among syllables inside the fields of force emanating from every other vertex. Geometry proves that only 14 varieties of stalagmate can occur during the end games for such atomic tug-of-wars. Crystals are acrostics generated by the stochastics of a cage. Lattices gridlock bits of symmetry inside networks of microcircuitry. Lattices distribute points throughout a space in the same way that a spondy or trochee distributes stress across a line. Tinker toys permit children at play to learn through intuition the grammatical fundamentals of a crystalline architecture. Friedrich Mohs, 1773 to 1839. Pretty words like fluorite or feldspar are far too soft for sale as gemstones, since they suffer wear when worn as jewelry. Words can chip away at each other when jostled together. Worship a teacher when led to her. Write her, weld her, wither, wit, it, I. Writing represents the superficial damage endured by one surface when inflicting damage upon the surface of another. Angels reside inside the angles of Galena. The Neoplatonic universe is a glass onion in which each layer swivels around a rotten core, the worm-eaten cosmos, a mere chrysalis for a god, doomed to climb heavenward on a ladder of finite rungs by transferring the bottom rungs to the top. The great chain of being is now deoxyribonucleic. A chromosome can encode its genes within the sequence of its crystals, every codon like a bead upon a spiral abacus. Soft, sort, sore, core, chord, card, hard. L. A. Necker, 1786 to 1861. Cubes incubate ambiguity about the rubric of their structure. Unable to register both meanings of a homonym at the same time, the mind in its indecision must vacillate between two possible but contrary interpretations of the same message. The cube emulates the form of a photon, a phenomenon existing two ways at once, both mote and wave, a quantum pun, in which the universe must take delight. The homonyms that generate poetic interference split in two when passing through the double-slit experiments of speech. Light is not heavy. English models content to play with the lead of the cast type in this script. A man with an appetite for appetite puts quarts of quartz into barrels of barrels. The cube exists in two dimensions at the same time, while appearing to shift at random back and forth between them, without ever seeming to occupy both at once. The two words are either and or both and. unless one of the words is two words or one, two. The word at the end of this sentence is meaningless. Max von Laue, 1879 to 1960. X-ray machines that bombard the lattice of a crystal turn its skeleton and its scaffold into shadows cast by tesseracts. Mondrian drafted blueprints for a set of integrated circuits linking lines in zones of color. Mondrian painted microchips, each magnified 1,000,000-fold, but died before patenting them. When we study radiograms, we learn how to understand a poem by reading nothing but its pattern of punctuation. Cosmic rays make salt fluoresce in day-glow green and hot wax lemon, colors in the spectrum of phosphorus and kryptonite, even a blue like a backlit curacao. Each crystal is an optic sieve for the light shows that suffuse it. X-rays emit at wavelengths short enough to fit between the bars of an atomic cage, all its walls electric fences, all its cells black boxes, lit by a burst of invisible light. Writing is an obsolete machine for cat-scanning drops of frost caught within a web of dreams. The gossamer ghost of a skull gazes at us from black celluloid. Viruses are crystals come to life when exposed to radiation. W. L. Bragg, 1890 to 1971. X-rays illuminate black bodies with a light that no one sees, the sound of its flicker preserved in the shape of its silence. The loops and whorls of fingerprints resemble magnetic fields emanating from electrons in a crystal of amino acid whose genes go on to yield the loops and whorls of fingerprints. Each of us emits an infrared aura, as unique as any signature. Sand can dance into a pattern on the skin of a vibrant drum. A crystal contains immobile cyclones in its vacuum tubes. Isograms for storm fronts propagate in waves across the page. Stellar clusters seen on the video screen of a radio telescope reveal the crystal lattices that support a microscopic cosmos. X-ray machines conduct aerial surveys of a zone so infinitesimal in scale that it exists as a texture without surface, a ripple without water, the photo showing us the stillness of wind trapped within the silkiness of its space. Spider webs are bubbles of soap packed inside a window pane. The moire effect occurs when two lattices with a fine grain overlap at a slightly skewed angle so that, for a few seconds, they produce the illusion of motion amid the fixity of lines. Sunlight turns a swimming pool into a melting kaleidoscope. Sapphire. Altazimuth, allure, outshine, oniric oceanarium. Grain boundaries. Rim, rhyme, emery, memory, remora, memoir, moire, mirror, mirage, image, regime, gems, edges, emerge, energy, elegy, elegant, element, letter, stellar, steel, steam, metal, master, sleet, maelstrom, ice storm, serum, simulacrum, shimmer, sheer, meerschaum, echelon, mesh, measure, muse, machinery. Piezoelectricity. Crystalline batteries of electrified quartz emit ultrasonic songs. Fireflies materialize one by one ex nihilo inside the Leyden jar, hermetically sealed in 1754, then thrown overboard in a storm by associate members of the Royal Society. Flash bulbs and vacuum tubes, time capsules of brown glass, minus content, incandescent, subaqueous extremes of compression, soap bubbles that descend into will-o'-the-wisps. Luminosities brighten as the growing burden of their depth nears bathypelagic implosion. Electric eels awaken the body of a drowned dolphin to galvanic life in their embrace. Watch hearts fibrillate, their quartz crystals out of sync with each second coming, apart in minute hands, the stars but asterisks that ignite when they reach critical masses. Television static jolts clear under the stress of evening news flashes. Hyphens like steel rods parallel to geomagnetic fields turn to magnets when struck at one end with a ball-peen hammer. Sparks, tribioluminescent from prehistoric impacts of flint, jump-start tools like manual typewriters into dreams of existence, each keystroke inducing an electroshock therapy in you, unwitting user. Words are but one-way mirrors, cracked by the vices of a picture frame. Jade. Oriental Nachtmusik. Opium, Ormolu, Alalia, Octagon. Sing-song siamang, origami, Ouija board. Holosymmetry. A euphemism for all organic unity found in crystalloidal form. A synonym for beauty in a discourse bereft of aesthetic theories. A structural tendency in any form that shifts to a higher dimension. A geometric principle by which nature makes spherical the cubical. A figure whose parts resemble each other from any perspective. A portal that opens like a porthole to link every part to its whole. A crystalline spectrum maps the aesthetic value of all stylistic paragons, from isometric order in classicism to triclinic disorder in modernism. The hexakisoktahedron being the most symmetric of all the crystal habits, its 13 rotary axes and 9 reflective planes, for its 4 dozen facets, rigidest rhyme scheme, an ideal form driving insane every scientific monk who inhabits its polyhedral cathedrals, almost every organism a bilateral construction divided against itself, almost every particle a planet, spinning 2 times for every sunset. Enantiomorphosis. The Catoptriarchs, AD 711 to 777, a Slavonic sect of Christian Gnostics, advocated the enantiomorphic heresy, which declared that all earthly existence was but a fleeting reflection in a looking-glass unveiled in the gardens of the Heavenly Father. Catoptriarchs expressed their contemptus mundi by refusing to gaze upon the world unless it was reflected in a mirror. Any disciple of this sect was easily identified by his periscopic obsession with a sheet of silver plating, which he always carried with him in one hand, and from which his glance never strayed, even when riding on horseback. Catoptriarchs earned erroneous repute for their narcissism and suffered persecution by the official clergy in Constantinople. Manuscripts written by the Catoptriarchs were almost all destroyed because of the Slavonic mirror writing in these texts being entirely illegible, and thus often mistaken for satanic speech by monastic archivists, who burnt each book for the blasphemy not of its theme, but of its style. René Justouet, 1743 to 1822, a French crystallographer, numbered among the inventory of his scientific library an incunlabrium thought to be of Latin transcription of a manuscript originally written by a Catoptriarch. The Latin was enciphered by an autonomous monk who wrote using an unusual alphabet inspired by the diffraction patterns that sunbeams made when passing through prisms of rock quartz or layered panes of glass. The French Revolution saw the destruction of this book in the fire at Huey's library, when arsonists stormed the streets and indiscriminately burned any property that might even suggest the lifestyle of an aristocrat. Documentary evidence about the Catoptriarchs survives now only in the fragmentary marginalia scribbled by Huey in the pages of his private diaries after the fire, diaries in which he not only recounts from memory the above anecdotes, but also reconstructs as best he can the prismatic alphabet of his lost text. De Speculum Oraculum, AD 1230, the final volume in a trilogy about medieval glassblowing, now resides deep in the secret repository of forbidden books at the Vatican, since the text allegedly describes heretical techniques for predicting the advent of the apocalypse. Written on scorched vellum pages interleaved between polished steel plates, all bound together by solid glass clumps, one at each corner, the text discourses upon the arts of both catoptromancy and crystallomancy, two genres of soothsaying that allow a clairvoyant to foresee the future, to witness the end of the world by gazing into the hypnotic abysses of either mirrors or crystals. De Speculum purports to be the vade mecum for a secret guild of German glassblowers supposedly able to manufacture a mirror that can, when smashed, depict a multitude of destinies in its mosaic of fragments, each piece containing a different image, a single scene, from the life of the person last reflected in the glass. The diverse images among the random shards do not appear to have any coherent order, so that the clairvoyant must interpret their proper relations within the arrangement. The clairvoyant constructs a narrative from the mosaic whose images stay visible so long as the pattern of their shattering goes undisturbed, for even a slight movement of the mosaic causes them to disappear, never to return. The Speculum concludes with a natural history of crystals, complete with diagrams. The book alludes to a theory of optics in which the pathways of light through a jewel embody the pathways of thought through the mind, so that optical reflection provides an allegory for cerebral reflection. The book goes on to warn that gazing into a perfect crystal for too long can cause the soul of the clairvoyant to become trapped irrevocably within the faceted depths of the gem. The imprisonment of the soul in this way causes the clairvoyant to go insane, and destruction of the gem results in the immediate death of the imprisoned victim. The text predicts that the world ends when men lose their minds by emptying their memories into mirrors in the same way that scribes write messages upon a page. Christian Weiss, 1780 to 1856, a German crystallographer, recounts in a love letter to his mistress the following curious anecdote about a discovery that he made during his research on crystalline symmetry at the Berlin Academy. Weiss reports purchasing a medieval treatise on the use of mirrors in the game of chess, a treatise that he found at an antiquarian bookstall on the verge of the ghetto. Weiss writes that the prolegomnon of the book chronicles the apocryphal experiments of a Saracen alchemist reputed to have made items vanish by placing them between a tall pair of looking-glasses erected in the court of his patron, the Caliph. Double mirrors facing each other can, according to this book, trap the spirits of the dead who pass between them. Moreover, any living person who has no soul can step into either one of the mirrors as if it were an open door, and thus walk down the illusory corridor that appears to recede forever into the depths of the glass, by virtue of one mirror reflecting itself in the other. The walls of such a corridor are said to be made from invulnerable panes of crystal, beyond which lies a nullified dimension of such complexity that to view it is surely to go insane. The book also explains at length that after an eternity of walking down such a corridor, a person eventually exits from the looking-glass opposite to the first one entered. Weiss speculates that a soulless man might carry another pair of mirrors into such a corridor, thereby producing a hallway at right angles to the first one. Such a man might, of course, perform this procedure again and again in any of the corridors, until he has erected an endless labyrinth of glass inside the first pair of mirrors, each mirror opening onto an extensive grid of crisscrossing hallways, some of which never intersect, despite their lengths being both infinite and perpendicular. Weiss expresses his own misgivings about becoming hopelessly lost while exploring such a maze, and he wonders what happens to the prisoner if the initial pair of mirrors are disturbed, so that they no longer reflect each other, thus suddenly obliterating the fragile foundation upon which the entire maze rests. Weiss never divulges the title of this bizarre treatise, and since no one has ever corroborated the existence of such a book, literary scholars have simply dismissed this anecdote as an elaborate falsehood, designed to entertain his mistress, a countess rumored to have grown easily bored with any lover, unable to appease her intellectual appetite for enigmas, puzzles, and rebuses. Reverend Charles Ludwig Dodgson, 1832 to 1898, a British mathematician, wrote about his experiments with hallucinogenic drugs, recording his experiences on some pages tipped into a single copy of the first edition of his treatise on geometry, Euclid and His Modern Rivals, a copy now thought to be in the possession of a private collector in Luxembourg. Dodgson reports that while reading the book Al-Araf during his studies at Christ Church in Oxford, he grew ever more curious about altered states of mental awareness and thus decided to visit a pharmacy where he acquired a dose of crystallized opiates, in the hope that he too might experience within the privacy of his own garret the visions of the poetry. Dodgson wrote that shortly after administering the drug in an infusion of laudanum, he began to feel an ominous anxiety while contemplating the halo of light rays emanating from a gas lamp in his room. For the rays seemed to grow steadily more distinct, more refined, attenuating themselves into long, slender needles honed to a divine acuity, the lamp transmutating into what he described as a silvery thistle of illumination, radiating acicular beams of searing energy that pierced through any object in their path. Distressed, he stood up suddenly from his desk and accidentally knocked over a looking-glass, only to see it topple in slow motion onto the floor, where the mirror burst into smithereens. Dodgson claimed that to his amazement the glittering fragments of the broken mirror floated up, one by one, into the air, each a spinning prism that began to orbit elliptically around his head and body at an accelerated rate until all the shards formed a kind of kaleidoscopic shield that deflected the sharpened beams of gaslight. Dodgson, euphoric, described himself later as a tree surrounded by its nimbus of silver leaves when the wind shivers them to life. Mesmerized, he attempted to step out through this cyclonic barrier of flying shrapnel, only to faint when the light rays pierced him at every point, and the bladed shards of glass sliced him to shreds. Dodgson awoke, uninjured, hours later beside his broken mirror and promptly recorded the hallucination in his journal, but then decided to keep his experience secret, for fear of being diagnosed as deranged by his academic colleagues, who thought him a bit queer for befriending pubescent girls by composing for them nonsensical verse. Jacques Lacan, 1901 to 1981, a French psychoanalyst, first delivered his seminal essay The Mirror Stage as formative of the function of the eye on July 17, 1946, while attending the 16th International Congress of Psychoanalysts in Zurich. Lacan upheld the idea that an infant in the first months of its life could only apprehend the experience of both self and other via méconnaissance, the child misconstruing itself as other when seeing its own reflection in a mirror for the first time. Lacan argued that this developmental stage induced a crisis of alienation, since the subject defined itself through an external image whose identity could never coincide exactly with the identity of the child. Because of this irreconcilable distance between the subject and its reflection, the child could only admire its own image for providing a coherent representation of the self, but also despise its own image for withholding a representation congruent with the self. Lacan concluded that this psychodrama marked the transition of a subject from a state of lack to a state of desire. Le Monde reported in its morning edition on the same day as this academic symposium that Dr. Jules Verrier, a clinical psychiatrist, had gone insane while trying to escape from an elevator that had trapped him alone overnight between the floors of his office building. Verrier had apparently screamed for almost 7 hours straight, all the while clawing away at the mirrored interior of his compartment, before firemen finally rescued him and escorted him away under restraint. Sources close to the scene testified later that the psychiatrist had behaved quite hysterically, insisting to authorities that he had become involved in a case of mistaken identity, that he was the wrong person taken into custody since his reflection in the mirrored wall of the elevator had somehow traded places with him. His reflection had suddenly refused to imitate him and had stepped out of its frame so as to force him to occupy the space vacated in the glass. Verrier was committed a day later to l'Hôpital Général in Paris, where doctors tried to console him by telling him that obviously he was not imprisoned in a mirror, but he responded to treatment by yelling in frustration that nobody understood him, for he insisted that this world was itself, the very world beyond the mirror, a world from which his reflection had escaped, tearing itself free so as to wreak havoc upon the true reality. Medical authorities at the asylum diagnosed the patient as a paranoid catoptrophobiac, but confessed ironically that they now preferred to exit the building via the stairs. Notes. Crystalline forms that mirror each other through an axis of symmetry are called enantiomers. For example, a vertical axis makes enantiomers not only of B and D, but also of P and Q, just as a horizontal axis makes enantiomers not only of B and P, but also of D and Q. Words form enantiomers of each other only when one translates into the other through reflection. Enantiomers can also occur when two crystals undergo the process of interpretant twinning. For example, W takes shape at the moment when V twins with its enantiomer through a vertical axis, just as X takes shape at the moment when V twins with its enantiomer through a horizontal axis. Such symmetries underlie the order of all crystalline forms. Mirrors have historically provided a mathematical means for identifying a crystalline structure on the basis of its internal symmetries. A scientist determines the class of symmetry to which a crystal belongs by slicing the crystal along diverse axes with a mirrored blade. The reflections in the blade define the degree to which the crystal is symmetrical with itself. Even a palindrome is a kind of enantiomer. For example, the phrase mirror rim reveals a sequential symmetry in which the order of letters in one direction repeats itself when reversed. Each letter is also catoptric in its own structure. The doubled R doubled the letters M, I, and O, each symmetrical through a vertical axis. The gap between the two words, a flaw in the gem. Topaz. Alexandrine ortolan, orangutan, Sinhalese fantasia, onomastic, otacoustic, almandine. Farewell.